Welcome to Food Psych, a podcast about intuitive eating, body positivity, and health at every size. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified intuitive eating counselor specializing in weight-inclusive wellness. Join me as I talk with interesting people from all walks of life about their relationships with food.
I remember I was teething, little gums bleeding, cried every evening, it was all about eating. When I became a teen, it was all about beefing. Now I'm ready for the world, trying to sink my teeth in, stacking extra cheese.
Hey there, welcome to episode 99 of Food Psych. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and today I'm talking with an amazing activist and writer, Lindy West, author of the book Shrill Notes from a Loud Woman, and also a regular columnist in The Guardian, and just a fantastic, phenomenal, hilarious writer. I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. She's a fat acceptance activist and feminist writer who's had her own complicated journey with food and her body. And we talked about body positivity and feminism, her journey to accepting her body and claiming the identity of fat, what it has been like to be a fat acceptance activist in diet culture, some of the responses she's gotten, and some of the ways that she's learned to navigate that and where she's at now in her journey with food. I can't wait to share it with you in just a moment. It's such a good one. But first, I want to share a couple of great resources for helping you make peace with food. The first is brand new, and it's based on some of your feedback that people gave in the Food Psych Facebook group. So thank you to everyone who responded. And I developed a new free guide based on your feedback. It's 7 simple strategies for finding peace and freedom with food. And it's a special free audio download, like a mini podcast episode with me really walking you through these 7 strategies. So you can get it via text. That's also a fun new thing I've added. So text Food Psych to the number 44222. That's a US number. So I don't know what happens if you do that outside the US, but just be aware. Probably nothing because I think long distance is fine. I don't know. Anyway, 44222, put that in the number field. And then the word you type in is Food Psych, all one word. Text that off and you'll get your free audio download. Or you can visit christyharrison.com/strategies on your computer. That's christyharrison.com/strategies, and you'll get the guide that way. The second resource I want to share is my Food Psych Facebook group, which I just mentioned earlier. It's a wonderful community of very supportive, body positive folks who are on the anti-diet journey just like you. You can join by going to christyharrison.com/community. Someone in the group just wrote me saying, I love the Facebook group and really appreciate that there's no price wall for it. This is the first time I've ever felt like there are people out there I could talk with about food, eating, and size without being judged. And it really is such a supportive, non-judgmental community. So definitely check it out. Join if you haven't already, christyharrison.com/community. And then finally, if you like the podcast and you want to help us reach more people who need to hear the body positive message, leave us a nice rating and review on iTunes. Just open up iTunes from your computer or your podcast app on your phone, type in Food Psych to the search bar, click on the result that comes up under podcasts, and then click on the ratings and reviews tab, and you can leave your rating and review there. All right, so let's go to my conversation with Lindy West. I spoke with her in person in New York City when she was here for her book tour, which was so cool. And I should say a light trigger warning for her book. It's hilarious and wonderful and so great for anyone who's pretty firmly rooted on their body positive journey and needs a dose of radical body positivity and fat acceptance. But there are a couple numbers in there, like it's used in a really funny way to sort of poke fun at people for being obsessed with weight. But if you're vulnerable to that, if numbers trigger you in general, then maybe wait on it until you're ready. But I highly recommend this book. It's been one of my favorites of the last couple years, and I can't wait to share this conversation with you. So now, without any further ado, let's go talk to Lindy West. So tell me about your relationship with food growing up.
I think it was pretty average. You know, I was a kid, like any kid, I liked ice cream and candy, but I also ate my vegetables. And, you know, my mom cooked every night. We had taco night and hamburger night. And my mom's a nurse, so she was pretty conscientious about making sure that I ate I would say a balanced diet. And I played sports. So I played a lot of sports. I was really active. And so I didn't really think about what I ate. You know, I would definitely I didn't have hangups about it until much later, I would say. Like I didn't diet as a teenager.
That's pretty amazing in this day and age, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because now I spend all my time thinking about this stuff. And, I knew that I was, despite being really active, I was big, like bigger than the other kids. Looking back at pictures, I don't see a fat teenager. I just see a teenager, which is funny because at the time I always felt like huge, not even just in a fat way, but like I felt like a giantess. You know what I mean? Like I just felt like I always knocked things over. I didn't fit in, I wasn't comfortable in like crowded spaces. But in retrospect, I was just tall and kind of big, like ungainly.
Did that happen fast? Did you get your growth quickly or?
I don't remember. I guess so. It's funny. I don't know why I don't have distinct memories about stuff like this. I don't remember how old I was when I got my period. I remember sort of one turning point where I noticed that all of my friends were smaller than me because they started to notice. Like I remember I was at a birthday party and some sadistic child suggested that we separate into two groups, the kids who were over pounds and the kids who were under pounds. And I don't even think I knew how much I weighed, but I could tell that I belonged in the big group. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like in a judgmental way. Maybe it was. I don't know. But I just remember being like, oh, this is the bad group to be in. Mm. But my mom was always on a diet because I think, my mom didn't struggle with her weight as a young woman. She was always very slender and beautiful and active and conventionally beautiful. But she was always, when she started to put on a little weight as she got into her, maybe, 40s and 50s, she was always on Jenny Craig. She was always eating lean cuisine. And then she would make a whole separate meal for me and my dad. And I always remember thinking like, man, why? I don't want that life, Just felt kind of sad that she felt like she needed to do that. And then it's so funny that this is all muddled. I did go to Weight Watchers with her at some point. And it must have been in high school. Yeah. And I just found it mortifying. It was just like I was the youngest person there. And you do this sort of like public weigh-in, like you all stand in line and get weighed. And it felt so like pathologizing, and I just felt like, just a kid. I don't know. I was just sort of, and I can't remember how much of it was her wanting me to go and how much it was me wanting to go because I was starting to internalize this, negative idea about my body. I can't remember.
It's so interesting how insidious it is, how it really just seeps in there and it feels normal and you have these little moments that you don't even remember. Mm-hmm. But all along the way, diet culture is getting its claws in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It very quickly, I think as soon as I went to my first Weight Watchers meeting, I was like, oh my God, I'm trapped. It was this idea of feeling trapped, like, because I know it's been made very clear to me that this body is not acceptable. I can't just live in this body. But this weight loss thing, this diet culture thing is so painful to be a part of. Like, it just made my skin crawl. And, it was me and a bunch of, women in their 60s who were sitting in these meetings and crying about not being able to lose weight. And they had been trying for the past 40 years. And I was just looking ahead to my future and thinking, is that how I want to spend the next 40 years of my life? But also I didn't have any concept that there was another option. I was like, well, I guess this is going to be my life.
Yeah, it looks like that's what adulthood means for a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be, and this for a fat woman especially, right. Like this is going to be the defining struggle of my life. And I'm going to have to fight this battle with my body for the rest of my life and sit in these humiliating meetings and talk about yogurt and about counting out my almonds. The idea that you can only eat a certain number of almonds. Oh. That was when I really snapped and I was like, okay, never mind. I'm not counting almonds.
No, it's no way to live.
I'm not having almonds. I'm not living my life with almonds.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
It's literally insane.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no. And I think this is the thing because I work with eating disorders. That's sort of how I came to this Health at Every Size work. And at a certain point, I realized we are diagnosing in thin people what we prescribe to fat people. Like, there's something wrong with that, because in someone who wasn't, socially considered like needing to lose weight, counting out your almonds would be seen as extremely disordered. It might fit in with a pattern of anorexia or orthorexia or whatever. It would be diagnosed as an eating disorder, but somehow it's applauded if you're in a larger body.
Right. Absolutely. And, the fact that we are applying different standards to different people, or like if you didn't see a picture of me and I mean, not me, because I don't do that anymore, but, like if you were to just be presented with a list of behaviors without a picture of the person's body, we should be able to have a standard diagnosis for those behaviors.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's going that way a little bit in the eating disorder community, thankfully, with the pressure from the Health at Every Size movement. But it still needs to be brought out there on a larger scale, because there are these companies, these, billion-dollar companies that are profiting off of people's body insecurity and teaching them extremely disordered behaviors that then, of course, keep them coming back for more, right? Because that's the big secret about diets is that they don't work long term. You get this sort of initial high of maybe losing weight for a temporary period, and then you end up regaining it, and often more than you started with. And so it keeps you going back to the diet again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely, I was thinking about sort of my relationship with food now, which is mostly, I know normal is a loaded term, but, like I don't binge. I don't, and of course I get people emailing me every day, berating me for like they assume that I eat cheeseburgers a day or whatever, which is just strange. But I do think that I have sort of left over from being immersed in diet culture as a younger person. I do have like a weird food, I don't want to say like insecurity, but it's like when there is like junk food in the house, or it's like if I go to a party and there's like a buffet, the idea that I wouldn't have a dessert, it feels to me like I will never again in my life encounter a dessert, and so I have to have one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that depravation mindset.
Exactly. It's this feeling of like, well, I don't know. I feel like I'm asking you for free therapy or something, but I definitely, I don't do things like, I don't do sort of binge eating behaviors, but I do a thing that feels compulsive to me, where it's like, okay, I have to. Or if someone's like, oh, do you want to take some of this home? It's like, I have to like get the biggest possible piece that I can to take home because I might never have it again or something.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I don't know. Even though I know intellectually that that's not true. And even if I don't, like this morning, we went to this grilled cheese restaurant for lunch, and there was like, they had milkshakes, and I was like, I should get one. And I was like, I really don't want one. I actually kind of have a stomachache. And I was like, but when will I be at a place with a milkshake again? And I was like, okay, calm down. Like, it's like I have to deliberately make my brain think about, do I actually want this?
Right.
And reject it. Like it requires extra thought. Like an extra step.
Which is such a normal response, actually, when you've been deprived and when you've been in diet culture. And a lot of people do have this experience as well of like the off limits or bad foods, the ones that you haven't, fully trusted that you could have available at all times throughout your life. When those are presented to you, it's like, oh God, got to fill up on these because I don't know when I'm going to have it again. And it's a trauma.
Yeah, especially when they're presented in either a private situation or a non-judgmental situation where like I know no one is watching me and no one's going to, like, it's hard for me to go to the store and buy a piece of cake or something because, when you're fat, you're always under surveillance when you're eating. Like, people are always watching you and judging what you're eating. So yeah, if there's ever like a time when it feels safe to, like, where I'm in an empty restaurant and no one's going to see me have this milkshake, my brain is like, oh my God, you have to do it. You have to do it.
Right. Even if you don't want it.
Yeah. Which is a bad system.
Yeah, no, totally. But it's also so normal for anyone who's in that position because it sounds like you haven't, maybe, is there a sense in which you haven't fully made peace with those foods? Like you're still internalizing some stigma on them from the outside?
I guess so. I mean, it doesn't really feel like that. It feels more like they still feel like they have a value attached to them where like this is a reward for an accomplishment or something.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's how you're sort of taught to treat bad foods.
Right.
That feels like the thing that I haven't shrugged off. Like, I deserve to have this. I don't know. I guess I'm sure it is just not having shed some baggage that there is no food that I get to like consume in a normal way. every food that I consume is signaling something to the world. And it's not just that I'm hungry.
Right.
Fat people don't get to just be hungry. You're either performing like a public penance by eating a salad, or you are confirming all the stereotypes about yourself by eating a hamburger. And you're not allowed to just nourish your body. And so, yeah, I guess like seizing opportunities to experience pleasure through food, it's really hard for my brain to pass that up, I think.
Yeah, because you haven't really internalized the idea that you deserve pleasure through food whenever you want, like
Right.
no matter what other people say, because there is this, enormous pressure, and being able to feel people's scrutiny is really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And there's also, food has never been more sort of fashionable and aggressively pushed upon us. Like, we live in this culture of the Food Network and, watch 10 million cooking shows. And here's a show that's entirely about cheese, top 100. But then you're not supposed to actually indulge in any of it unless you are a very, very small person who is sort of doing the opposite, the way that like actresses and models like ostentatiously eat cheese.
Right. And it's like, ooh, she's
so down to earth.
She's cool. She's a cool girl. Yeah. She's
Right.
so down to earth.
Yeah. It's all messed up. It's very...
Yeah. So after that Weight Watchers experience, did you kind of dive into diet culture, and did you have moments where you really internalized, like, I'm not supposed to eat these foods?
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I was never very good at it, though. I was never very good at diet culture.
Most people aren't.
It sucks.
It really sucks.
It really sucks. Like, I've done like Nutrisystem for 1 month. I mean, really, like, it's inedible. So 1 week. And then that is like, I remember I tried to call and cancel, and they like don't let you cancel, and they auto renew your hundreds of dollars of gray garbage, tasteless garbage. I've gone to like nutrition classes. I did a program at a hospital, like a weight loss program in Seattle that was like, you go meet with a coach once a week and they tell you about yogurt and almonds again, like, as though one of these days I'm going to learn. I just remember going to nutrition class and being the fattest person there, because it was run by my sort of upscale gym that I went to in downtown Seattle. And, the teacher was really nice. I really liked her, actually, but she was certainly not a health at every size proponent. I mean, she was very like, I remember her telling me a couple of things. I remember her telling me that if I was under the impression that my thin friends eat the same way that I do, I'm wrong. She was like, I think you would find that if you actually looked at your diet side by side, that they're eating significantly less than you, and it's an illusion if you think it's the same. And I was like, oh, okay. I remember her saying that she doesn't think of like food deprivation as deprivation. She thinks of it as feeling light. And she likes to feel light. And I just remember sitting there and being like, this doesn't like, and I really liked her. Like, she was a really sweet woman. And I genuinely liked her, but I could feel that it was not sort of mentally healthy, at least for me. And, everyone in the class pretty much everyone was thin, and they were trying to like lose their last pounds or whatever. And then there was me. I was like, just every class I was just sort of sitting there like sometimes I would just laugh, because it was the amount of food that we were told to eat was absurdly small. And I was like, is that what it actually takes? Because that's not a lifestyle that I can maintain. And that was sort of, it was in that class that I started to really turn the corner and reckon with the idea that this might be my body forever. Because I was like, if that is the deal, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't want to live that life. I want to live a social, joyful, rich life. And it was so much labor to keep that up that I never, I could do it for like a couple months.
Right.
And I would lose weight.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a life.
It always starts that way. It always starts with like buckling down, severely restricting, maybe you lose some weight, but our bodies are actually designed not to let that happen for long. Our bodies think we're starving at that point, and so they are going to drive you to regain the weight.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it's not a life. It's not pleasurable. It's designing your entire life around food, really.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, there have been times, it's so funny. There was other times when I lost weight and it wasn't deliberate. It was like, I got really into working out with a trainer because I loved my trainer, and it feels good to move your body. And I was in a point where I could afford it, and I had a really flexible schedule, and it was really fun to have to have a routine. And I was like, oh, my body changed when I wasn't even paying attention to it. And it wasn't the kind of weight loss where like I was going to suddenly become pounds. And anyway, I just remember that moment and thinking, man, that nutrition class was a crock, And of course, that's now my life is chaos again, and I don't go to the gym. And my body has gone back to what it was like, and that's fine. I don't feel any certain way about that one way or the other.
Yeah, this is very common too, because there's a theory. It's called set point theory, but it's really more like set range, where your body wants to be in a certain range. It's genetically programmed to be there. And, if you've gone through diet cycles, sometimes your set range gets driven up, but like it's a range. And if you're, not moving much and stress eating a lot and, kind of just not taking great care of yourself, you might be at the higher end of your set range. And if you're doing all those things, taking good care of yourself, you might be at the lower end of your set range. It's never going to change dramatically. It's just sort of a small range, but you might notice a difference in yourself.
Yeah, I guess it's like what I noticed was that the times when my body has been at the lowest of its set range are the times when I've been happiest and most well-adjusted. Well, and I've also lost weight like when my dad died and I didn't eat anything for weeks. And that's not that was the level of deprivation that this nutrition coach wanted me to live in for the rest of my life. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to live in like grief mode forever.
And that's a really natural response to grief too. It kills your appetite. So a lot of people will experience inadvertent weight loss through grief. And then it gets problematic if you're already hating your body and having wanted to change it and be like, ooh, let me do more of this.
Right. And that seems like a bad sign.
Yeah.
For that style of eating. You know what I mean? Or that style of not eating.
Right.
Like you want to mimic horrible grief or, people who have a horrible disease.
Right.
And, lose tons of weight and get complimented on it.
I know. That's why the thin ideal is so damaging, because it's a look of like either prepubescent or, having gone through some major grief or illness. It's not something we should aspire to.
Well, I mean, it's fine. Your body is your body. I just think that basing decisions about people's health on aesthetics, which is what that is, standards of conventional attractiveness, is just nonsense. It just makes no sense. And it's really dangerous.
It really is. And actually when you were talking about the nutritionist you went to who was advocating that disordered behavior, a lot of people in the nutrition field, a lot of people in the medical field are very disordered themselves about food and have a lot of internalized weight bias. And like the medical profession that has the highest levels of weight bias is obesity researchers, which is like, that's saying something, that the people who are, the most anti-fat are the ones who are doing this research to try to help make people not fat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's another angle to that is like, I have to be so grateful to like thin people who bother to go into, fat studies and advocate for fat people, because they have more credibility than fat people advocating for ourselves. And it's like, that's so insulting and so infuriating. I do have that gratitude, but it's like, why do fat people not have credibility when it comes to ourselves and our experiences and our own lives? I mean, it's just another manifestation of that bias. But
yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like, as a thin ally to this movement, I've had to reckon with a lot of that. Like, I'm trying to center people who are in fat bodies who can speak out and, tell their stories. And I also know that my podcast is probably more popular than people who, are blogging or whatever, who are in fat bodies. And I'm getting maybe more popularity because I have this privilege,
Yeah. And part of that is because we assume that fat people are stupid.
Yeah.
And stupid and lazy and full of excuses. And it's especially, this intellectual inferiority that we put on fat people. There's this assumption that like when this message comes from you, people might be like, oh, maybe there is something to that.
Right, right.
Whereas if I say it, I'm just making excuses.
Which is bullshit because, I mean, it's all the same, it's the same message. We're all looking at the same data, having the same reactions to it. And I mean, you're so fucking brilliant. I love your book. You're so funny. Like, I feel like it's really important. And part of the reason I do this as a podcast as opposed to like a video show or something is that I like for people to be able to experience someone's intellect and personality without the association of how they look. Because I think we put so much on, how people look. It's nice to be able to kind of hear and identify with people of all different sizes, all different ethnicities, genders, whatever, and be like, I feel compassion for them. I resonate with them. Maybe that will help break down some of the stigma.
Yeah. I definitely feel like it's been very useful. Like it's been pretty kind of powerful in my career that my career started before social media. So I accrued a lot of fans who didn't know what I looked like. And it was, that was years before I started writing about fatness and body image. And then I got to do this sort of Trojan horse thing, where suddenly I started writing about feminism and about fat acceptance and about rape culture and all these things that, people who were just fans of my silly movie reviews were not expecting, but they were already my fans. And so they had to, I feel like there were a lot of people who I brought into this conversation who might not have otherwise been receptive to it.
Definitely. I love that.
Or who wouldn't have taken me seriously. But it's like they already know me and they already did take me seriously. And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, guess what?
Yep, totally. And it kind of blows their mind, maybe.
I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Well, how was that transition for you? Because you talked in the book about coming out as fat. And I think that's such an important thing to discuss. Like, when was it that you started to feel like it was necessary to voice fat acceptance?
Yeah, I was in my mid-20s. I mean, late 20s, really. Let's see, I'm 35 now. And it was probably 7 years ago that I started or 7 or 8 years ago. So I was just really unhappy. I was really lonely, and I was totally convinced that I was going to be alone forever unless I lost weight. I felt like I couldn't be sort of bold in my career and be ambitious and really advocate for myself until I lost weight. Like everything felt like it was on hold, and it was contingent on me finally succeeding and assuming my real body.
Yeah, that Oprah myth, like there's a thin person inside every fat person.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think I started to read just fat fashion blogs, not even really like fat acceptance, like political literature, but just fashion, just pictures of fat people being happy and wearing cute outfits, and not apologizing. And they weren't weight loss before photos. They were just fat people living their lives in the present instead of, I was sort of living my life in the future. Like, okay, that's when I can really live. And this isn't real right now. This is just a sort of holding pattern. And I just started to think, like, what if I could do that? And it still felt really far away. Like I still didn't actually think that I could. There's so much risk in self-identifying as fat and saying that, you're not going to participate anymore. You're not going to apologize, and you're not going to, beg for forgiveness for your body every single day.
Yeah, there's so much potential backlash.
Yeah, we punish people.
We do.
We punish people very aggressively, and everyone is aware of the punishments. And I knew that it would be sort of throwing away whatever small sliver of a shot I had at finding a relationship. Like, who wants to date a girl who talks openly about being fat and being, you know what I mean? It turns out, plenty of people.
Yeah.
But, at the time I didn't realize that. But then so I started to read these blogs, and I was like, that is better. That's a better life. Do I want to wait forever? I'm not religious. I just believe that we get one life, and my 20s were ticking away, and I was just sort of like, oh man, I don't want this to be my life. And I was also, and I write about this in the book, I was also dealing with sort of fat phobia coming from my boss who was writing about the obesity epidemic a lot. And it was really painful for me to have to read that, not just, on the internet, but from inside my own workplace,
It's like, yeah, you feel sort of unseen or unappreciated.
It was strange. It was like, how can you write this when I'm sitting right here? And then I realized that if I was going to stand up to him and say, like, hey, FYI, there's a fat person in your office, and when you write these posts, you're talking about me, your friend, I had to actually call myself a fat person, which I had never done because I was a thin person who had failed, who was failing but would eventually succeed. And so I realized that you can't advocate for yourself if you're not honest about who you are. And so I was like, all right, well, let's do it. I mean, really, it was, I guess it was sort of born of frustration, that frustration from having to read these snide posts about fat people's terrible butts.
Right.
And I was like, man, I can't not say something. Also because I knew other fat people were reading the paper. Other fat people knew what I looked like and knew that I wasn't saying anything. I started to get comments about it, like anonymous comments about how my boss hated me because of my body. And, I was like, all right, fine. I'm done.
Yeah.
And I was in a bad relationship, and I finally sort of, it was this really cathartic moment where I like dumped this person, this dude who had just not been a good boyfriend, and wrote this post just sort of declaring like, hey, I'm a fat person. You have to treat me like a human being.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's a big, brave step,
It was really scary.
Yeah.
But it was also really satisfying. And I was shocked I had never done anything like that. I mean, oh my God. I was still pretty kind of a shy person at that point. And I had never done anything so confrontational. I had never done anything so vulnerable. And it was like, a lot of the comments, and there were thousands of comments. It was just bananas. But I was like, a lot of them were really mean. And then a lot of them were really beautiful, like really full of gratitude and really, really emotional. And people who had never heard of the idea of fat acceptance, which already, I'm not a pioneer in this movement at all, but there were a lot of people, it was certainly not mainstream. So a lot of people had never read these ideas before, especially not, in the snarky alt weekly,
Right.
It's not like it was, I mean, really sincerity was not a big part of the culture at the paper. And to have this sort of really, really raw, sincere expression of, I own my body, I like my body, other people like my body, and there's nothing wrong with it, and you don't get to tell me what to do with it. I mean, that was, I think, putting that out there and then getting to, for the first time, see my work change people's lives was totally transformative for me as a writer.
It took you to a place of like advocacy journalism, right?
Yeah. And I mean, a place of, I feel addicted to that now. Like all I want to do, like, well, how can I use my body to make other people's lives better? Like how much of my own skin can I peel off to help other people?
Right. And modeling someone who's in a larger body who loves it and who's, I mean, when you said that, I thought about the article you wrote about getting married, which has been, actually, I'm engaged and I'm, going through the process of like dress shopping and all of that. And that article was hugely helpful for me to remember. And for a lot of my clients too, who are getting married, who are feeling this pressure from the wedding industrial complex, which is really diet culture. It's really rooted in diet culture.
Yeah.
A lot of women who go to a dress fitting, the first question the tailor asks is like, how much weight are you going to lose? Like, it's a given.
Yeah. And I didn't expect that article to resonate so much. Honestly, it felt kind of narcissistic when I wrote it. I was like, am I really going to write a column about my own wedding? But yeah, it's so pervasive. And especially with the way that social media functions now, it was like, I got engaged, posted like just a picture of my ring, and Facebook immediately knew and started sending me targeted ads for weight loss, for like bridal boot camp.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man. And I do think it's also important. A thing that I really try to do is to model that kind of confidence and strength, but also I don't want to pretend like it's easy or like I'm perfect at it. You know what I mean? Because that's just not realistic. And it's not really fair to make people think that it's possible to sort of do body positivity perfectly.
That's so important. I love that you are open about that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I definitely was like, had moments where I was like, should I lose weight for my wedding?
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if it's just a little bit, like, you know, and then I just sort of, I kept coming back to the fact that this is the body that my husband proposed to. I know people who lost a ton of weight for their wedding and they hate looking at their wedding photos because it makes them feel regret for gaining that weight back. You know, I don't know. I just didn't want to look like a different person in my photos. And I, you know, realistically knew my track record with like, but you know, I just wanted to look like myself at my wedding. Basically, it's like, the last thing I want is to waste any of my life doing that. Oh, the year before my wedding, I want to be on a diet? No. I mean, my husband and I, or my fiance, then fiance, and I traveled, and we went to Malaysia, and we I don't know, my husband's an amazing cook, and we have parties, and I just don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah. No, and it's such a happy time. You want to be able to partake in it.
Yeah. I mean, food is so social and so cultural, and, you know, it's like, yeah, I just don't. I don't ever want to be bringing my baggie of almonds to the dinner party. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Man, I had the best time at my wedding.
Yeah.
It was great. It was so fun.
Oh my God,
I didn't think about, for people who have not gotten to this point on their journey or whatever, oh my God, not spending every waking moment thinking about, you know, what do my arms look like? Am I sucking in my stomach? Should I have worn Spanx? Oh my God.
Ugh.
The amount of time and energy that it frees up to not be doing that. Like, I'm like never self-conscious anymore. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess if I have to go to a restaurant with rickety chairs or something, you know, there are things that cause me anxiety. Airplanes cause me anxiety, but I will happily leave the house in my pajamas. Like, there are things that I used to feel like I had to be really put together all the time, because the worst thing is to be fat and sloppy. Man, I just don't care at all. And maybe that's a product of age more than fat acceptance. I don't know, but
I know people in their 40s and 50s, though, who feel like that too, who feel like they can't leave the house without makeup, who, you know, really want to be put together at all times. And we all deserve to be able to go out in our pajamas if we want to. Like, it's
funny. I feel I've been noticing this lately. My body positive journey earlier, you know, in my late 20s was really about giving myself permission and you know, figuring out how to feel comfortable wearing tight clothing that shows the shape of my body. And I realized that recently I've transitioned into a new phase where now it's like giving myself permission to wear giant billowing tents that make me look bigger, because there's also this thing where everything has to be flattering, and you have to like give your like cinch in at the waist, nip in at the waist.
Right. Dress for your body type.
Right.
Like,
exactly. And like, I've just been fixated on just massive like smocks.
I love it.
Just as unflattering as possible. And that has been, it was just this sort of unexpected new phase.
That's so cool. I mean, flattering is a myth perpetuated by diet culture too,
Absolutely.
right? So I think being able to blow that up is super important. And, you know, to get to that stage of like, I don't have to show my body or accentuate its assets or whatever. Like, I don't exist for anyone's visual pleasure, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except if you want to for yourself, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I have the right to be comfortable, you know? I don't have to wear 2 pairs of Spanx and a belt and a, you know, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, no, exactly. I had an experience recently where I had this old pair of tights that I never wore because they were a weird color, but I was like cold and I wanted to put them on under my jeans so that I had an extra layer. I put them on and I realized that like I bought them years ago when I was still concerned with, you know, cinching in, or like they were like a control top or something. And I was in such pain. I like got a stomach ache and I was like, oh God, I feel awful. And I was at this restaurant. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the bathroom and take these things off. And I felt better immediately.
Yeah.
Like it was shocking to notice how I had just accepted that as part of life for so long, to have this terrible stomach ache because something was pushing on my stomach. And like, you don't have to live like that.
Oh, the amount of discomfort that women especially take on. I mean, fat men don't wear Spanx.
No.
You know? And we wear high heels. Like,
right.
Oh my God.
So painful.
Or even just like, even if you're not wearing heels, like even cute flats are usually uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. They like smush your toes in a weird way.
And, my husband has like 3 pairs of shoes, and he just wears them till they wear out. And then he gets another, and they're all just sort of comfortable,
functional.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a bad system.
It really is. Well, that's sort of a good segue into talking about feminism, because I know that's been a big part of your body positive journey too, is sort of bringing in feminism to your work. So yeah, where did you sort of discover that? Like, how did that play into your fat acceptance journey?
It was sort of developed at the same time. I guess I was always writing from a feminist point of view when I was a film critic. I was not really overtly political in the way that I am now, but you can't help but notice as a woman and a critic, how are women treated in this movie? What stories are we telling women about themselves? And what stories are we telling men about women? And so that was always an element. And then I guess a big part of that big cathartic moment when I quote unquote came out, and I don't like to, that's kind of appropriative. That's a term that I've seen other people use, and I use it in the book, but I just want to caveat that, obviously that's a term associated with the LGBT community and it's not ours, but there is this idea of self-identification and declaring I'm fat in a way that is public, and it's sort of like, I'm getting off track, but it's like, it was this feeling of declaring sort of permanence. Like I might be fat forever. I'm not just a thin person who sucks.
Just needs to work harder or whatever.
Right, exactly. But anyway, so I had this, this big moment of this big cathartic moment. And a huge part of it was I was feeling like claustrophobic. Like I started to just feel like, just get off me. Like, why is everyone on me all the time? Like, let go of me and give me some space. And I think that was a very, I was having that same impulse from a feminist perspective at the same time, like, oh my God, men, can you get a grip and leave me alone? Like, can I live?
Right. Can I not be told to fucking smile? Like,
oh my God. Ugh. Right. And it's like that same, it's claustrophobia is the way that it feels to me. Like, it's just like, back the fuck up. Yeah. Oh my God. So, that I feel like that's where it started. I just started to have this really intense drive to like self-determination, like to decide who I am instead of cobbling together my identity from external feedback. You know what I mean? Like, okay, no, I am this person. I take up this space. I decide who I am, and I get to tell you how to treat me. I get to demand respect and demand humanity and demand space and the same rights as anyone else. And,
yeah, the social justice aspects of it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because the fact is that fat acceptance and fat politics and body image in general, it's inextricable from feminism. It is political. It's absolutely political. I think personally that putting these very, very, very strict, narrow confines on women's bodies and women's sort of aesthetic presentation, I think that's a deliberate effort to waste women's time, sap women's money, force women into competition with one another. And I think all of that, especially cumulatively over time, it saps women's power. Like, it affects how much power we have in the world and how much influence we exert over our communities. And
fuck yeah. It's like Naomi Wolf said, dieting is the most potent political sedative there is. It keeps women oppressed.
Absolutely.
And increasingly people of all genders too.
Right.
Absolutely.
There
are these unattainable ideals for gay men and trans people. Well, and being trans is like having to fit into an ideal of whatever gender. So it's everybody is experiencing it. Patriarchy touches everyone, I think.
Exactly. And so you can't make it apolitical.
No.
Like the idea that I'm somehow politicizing fatness, it's just, there's no apolitical version of this conversation. And so, yeah, and also, bodily autonomy, telling people what they can and can't do with their bodies, what they can and can't put into their bodies. You have to only eat certain foods. You have to punish yourself until you fit what is, I'm sorry, but a sexual standard. This is a standard based on straight white men's sexual preferences, or at least their stated. I mean, it's more complicated than that because, of course, they all also have like weird shame issues around being attracted to different bodies, to bigger bodies. But,
Right.
you know, it's not that far away from the abortion conversation to me, you know?
Right.
People are telling me what I can put in my body, and they're telling me what I can and can't take out of my body.
Right.
You know what I mean? How about I own my body?
Right. Exactly.
You know, men get to own their bodies.
Men do. Yeah. Men are given that at birth. That's part of male privilege.
Right. And the problem is that they're also told that they own ours.
Right. Yeah. And so taking a stand and declaring your ability to take up space and demanding respect is so important. And I think that's the social justice aspect of it is something that I think a lot of people I know who are interested in social justice in other arenas don't always see body size as fitting in to that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's sort of mind-blowing sometimes when people are like working on racial justice issues or rights for LGBTQ people and not really seeing how diet culture is oppression.
Yeah.
To sort of open people's eyes to that is so important.
I mean, people love to construe this conversation as being about fat people's feelings. And like, oh, Lindy West's feelings are hurt because men don't want to date her or whatever, which is like so disgusting on so many levels and also not true. They totally want to date me.
Yes.
But
I want to talk about that in a sec too.
but that's not actually the point at all. I mean, obviously it's important for people to be able to feel at peace in their bodies and be able to go out in public without being mocked and harassed on the street. All of these things are important. I actually think that feelings are important. I don't know when it became like cool to be anti-feelings. That's really strange to me, but okay. But really it's about systemic oppression of fat people. You know, it's about employment discrimination and medical bias and all of these things that are sometimes fatal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just, you know, it's anything from fat people being able to find clothing so that they can leave the house and go to job interviews and go to, you know, live the same kind of a full life as anyone else.
Right.
I mean, how debilitating is it to not even be able to clothe yourself? And this is a thing that thin people never have to think about.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law, Ijoma Oluo, who's a great social justice writer,
Yeah.
she posted something, she wrote an article the other day based on a Facebook post that she wrote where she was like, hey, if you're a thin person who supposedly believes in body positivity, why do you shop for clothes at stores that don't accommodate fat people?
Yeah.
And the response was off the rails. Thin people were so outraged that she would suggest that they make a small change and really just experience the same level of deprivation that fat people experience every day for their entire lives. Like, oh, like people were like, yeah, but then I can only shop at like 2 stores. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, you're still in a better situation because you can still shop at all of the stores that only carry plus sizes online and only carry a couple of pieces in plus size. You still get a way better selection. You can go to brick and mortar stores. You can buy something today. Like if I had to get a bra today, it might just be impossible, first of all, but it would, you know, bare minimum be a huge hassle and would probably be very uncomfortable. And I would have like 2 to choose from. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's so important and such a huge thing that thin allies to this movement can do is demand better selection from stores.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty simple, pretty easy step that you can take that could actually have a huge impact. But anyway, I got off track, but what I'm saying is this is not about people's hurt feelings. This is about human beings getting to live.
Right.
And live free of stigma and bias and oppression.
Right, exactly. It's a human problem. It's not an individual feelings issue.
It's not frivolous.
No.
And it's not individual. It is institutional.
Right.
You know? It affects fat people as a class.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing about the fat acceptance movement that is so important and so healing to people is showing people that things that they might have thought was an individual shameful problem that they had to keep secret or work out on their own. It's not your fault. It's not your problem. It's not an individual problem. It's this fucked up thing that society is doing to fat people.
Also, like, even if I did do all of the things that they say I do, like just have a IV drip of gravy all day long, whatever. I'm sorry, but I still deserve dignity and humanity and the same respect that you would give any other person. I still deserve employment and medical care.
Absolutely.
Like, sorry.
And effective medical care too. I mean, I've had people on the podcast tell me, like, I went in for what ended up being strep throat and they told me to lose weight and didn't give me antibiotics.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally fatal to be misdiagnosed as having a weight problem as opposed to a human health condition.
It's not good for thin people either.
No.
For thin people to go to the doctor and be presumed to be healthy because they're thin. No, that's not
exactly
not decoupling aesthetics from health is, I think, one of the most important battles that we need to fight right now.
I completely agree. And I think the science, people will always be like, but the science, like obesity is actually causing health problems. A, not true. It's correlation, not causation. And B, like so much of what gets published is filtered through this fat biased lens, such that getting health at every size research funded and published is very difficult because a lot of the grants that come to researchers are based on like, what are you going to do to battle obesity? You have to say how you're going to use this to fight obesity.
And the fact is that we know what we can do to change people's bodies and help people in general access better health. We know that there are many, many people who can't access fresh foods. We know that there are people who have to work multiple jobs and then are expected to go home and cook a fresh feast for their children,
And never get enough sleep because
never get enough sleep. And who don't have a grocery store in their neighborhood and who don't have a car and who,
or a safe place to move their body.
Right, exactly. Let alone time.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just think it's so, we know that people don't have access to mental health care. There are so many things that you can do that don't have anything to do with harassing and abusing fat people.
Right.
That might actually improve people's health.
And harassing and stigmatizing people is actually associated with worse health outcomes. Stigma is a big driver of chronic disease.
Absolutely. And also, when you think about people living in poverty, fat people living in poverty or anyone, you're telling these people what they can and can't eat. And you are stigmatizing them based on, you're watching what they put in their grocery cart and buy with their food stamps. How dare you? Food is cultural and food is social and it's comforting to people and it brings people joy. And if we already have so many people in this country who are barely surviving and you're telling them they're not allowed, because of your opinion of their body shape, they're not allowed to buy a piece of cake at the grocery store because you think they should be spending their money on celery.
Which is if you're hungry, if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money.
Oh my God.
Celery? No.
No, McDonald's. Oh my God.
Exactly.
Your children are hungry.
Yeah.
Your children are growing up with food insecurity and then they have issues with food when they're adults and they have issues with hoarding food and they crave calorie-dense foods and you want to stigmatize and abuse and punish them for that? It's just it's barbaric. And I just think fix poverty.
Yeah. Fix poverty, fix stigma, social injustice.
How do you know? You don't know what kind of fat person that is. Because there are, people who are like, well, if you're disabled, it's okay.
Right.
Or if you have a thyroid condition, it's okay. Or if you have some sort of horrible trauma, it's okay. Well, how do you know?
Right.
I think, I'm sorry, but the only solution is for you to behave in a humane way toward all fat people.
Yeah.
Because the fact is that we're human beings. Everyone's life is incredibly complex. Everyone's sort of cumulative, all the little things that life does to you and all the little choices that you make and all the little things that other people do to you. And it all accumulates. And it just happens that with fat people, you can see it. I don't know. That's not even what I want to say because I don't think there's anything wrong with being fat. So I don't even mean, and I don't think that every fat person is harboring horrible trauma and is eating therapeutically. It's just some people are just fat.
Yeah, it is actually, the BMI curve was developed initially to just describe the distribution of body sizes in the population. Like just a descriptive statistic of here is what we're seeing in the body size distribution. And so a bell curve, it's naturally, there's going to be people at the higher end, there's going to be people at the lower end, there's going to be, some more in the middle. And that's natural. That's what, there is this natural diversity of size in human existence.
Yeah. And the fact that we're even having this conversation, that I have to address the idea that some fat people are deserving of respect and dignity and other ones aren't. No. We shouldn't even be getting to this point in the conversation, because all of the human beings get to have the the dignity and humanity. Sorry.
Absolutely. And all of the human beings get to pursue self-care and health to the extent that they want to or, desire to. And if they don't want to pursue health, whatever their size, that's also not something that you can have any say about as an outside person. That's only, health is an individual decision. Health is a value to some people and it's not to others. Thin people, fat people, anyone.
We get one life and everyone gets to prioritize what they want to prioritize. And if you're upset about having to pay into an insurance pool that also covers fat people, sorry. Are you under the impression that you will never get sick and die?
Mm-hmm.
Are you also, if you don't like our healthcare system, lobby to change it.
Right.
I don't like it either.
Call your congresspeople, call your senators.
Exactly.
It's
fat people did not design it.
No. No, nor do, these statistics about the costs of obesity are total bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's all designed, it's filtered through a lens of weight stigma.
Right.
And, if there is any excess mortality risk not even mortality risk, because the research shows there is not actually, but if there's any excess morbidity risk for certain conditions in larger bodied people, most or all of that can be explained by stigma and weight cycling. So there you go. If there's not, already reason enough as a human being to want to treat people fairly and give them respect, whatever their size, we're not doing people's health any favors either by stigmatizing them.
And the fact is that, by you and I having this conversation, which, is necessary and we have to have it, but we're playing into this lie. It's none of those reasons are genuine. It's just about having a group of people that you can abuse to make yourself feel better, because the fact is that we do all live in this hierarchy of bodies. It's a really scary place to live. It's really difficult. And I think that it makes people feel safe to lash out and to remind the world that there are people lower than them on the hierarchy. I don't actually buy any of these health arguments. I don't think any of them are sincere. I don't think any of these people care about my health. I don't even think they really care about their insurance premiums. It's satisfying to have a group to abuse and laugh at.
And it's a sort of socially acceptable way to stigmatize people. If you're hiding behind this guise of I care about people's health or I care about the costs, it's more appropriate or something.
Right. And we're also at a point in history where people have invested lifetimes of time and money into the diet industry. And people have a lot at stake. And I get resentment, very, very fierce resentment from certain thin people who are, I think, just furious that I cheated and I skipped to the end. Happiness is supposed to be this reward for depriving yourself to the point where you conform and your body becomes acceptable. And I didn't do that part. I just skipped to the happiness part. I skipped to the happiness, confidence, and, a healthy relationship and all of these things that are supposed to be your prize for winning diet culture. And I think that there's a lot of people who are really afraid to let go of that because it would mean admitting that they wasted a bunch of money and a bunch of years, you know? And I actually have sympathy for that,
It's hard to accept. It's hard to sort of reckon with if you've been a, quote, success story in diet culture, that what you've been doing hasn't actually been necessary for happiness or health or any of the things you're promised. By winning.
Absolutely.
You mentioned relationships, and I really wanted to touch on that because you have such great discussion in the book about dating as a fat person and the sort of lack of commitment in some of those early relationships, but then also finding this amazing relationship and love and marriage and, how that all played out. So,
yeah, I had basically zero good experiences before my husband. I dated men who were kind of nice to me, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think I ever dated anyone that wanted to be seen with me in public or introduce me to his friends or parents or give me a Christmas present or, I mean, there was none of that. There was no commitment, no level of investment. It was just sort of, I was there and I didn't demand anything because I didn't think that I had any leverage. I assumed that my only option was to take whatever I could get because, we're told that fat women have no value. I mean, conventional beauty is the only metric that we use to measure women's value. And so I just assumed that, and I didn't, it's funny. It's like more nuanced than the way that I tend to talk about it. I didn't really internalize that. Like I didn't actually feel like I had no value, which I do think made my journey or my epiphany easier because I was always sort of enraged in this other way where I was like, I feel like I'm pretty cool, you guys.
Why are you not seeing that?
Like, I was like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I am like kind of cute and like I don't really know what the deal is here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
it's helpful for sure.
It's
being able to get angry and being able to like not internalize that shit.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful. It tends to get framed as like, oh, I hated myself, and then I came to it's like, no, I didn't. I never hated myself. I always was very aware that I was existing inside of a system. I just didn't realize that there was more than one way out. Like I thought the only way out was through the system. I didn't realize that you could sidestep that entirely. But anyway, I still, I thought I knew I lived in this system. And I was like, well, under this system, I don't get to demand anything. I'm lucky that anyone will have me. So anyway, eventually I was like, well, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. And I dumped my boyfriend, and I had been friends with my husband for a long time. I don't know, 7 or 8 years at that point. But he was married. He was actually married twice during that time. He was married he had just gotten divorced when I first met him when we were really young, like 23. He had just gotten divorced, and then he actually had another wife in between, a brief wife. But I was always like, wow, that guy is a bag of problems. I'm not, he's very, very handsome and funny and charming, but he's always like, why didn't you have a crush on me? And I was like, because you had kids and I was a kid. You had kids and 2 wives and you were clearly a chaos machine. I was like, nope. He was not only, I felt like he was an adult and I was still, my parents paid my phone bill, you know what I mean?
Totally.
I was like, I can't date a man with children.
Totally.
And then also I was like, also your life is nuts.
Yeah. Don't want to be a part of that.
Exactly. But then I dumped my boyfriend and I was like, he was not my boyfriend. I call him my boyfriend because that's
the best way to describe it.
Right. But no, I dumped the person that I hung out with for 2 years. And then I just started hanging out with my husband, my future husband. And then I don't even remember how it happened. We were basically just like, oh, I think we love each other. Like, oh, okay. And he's just the best guy. I don't know. I just love him so much. I feel like when I was a kid, they sort of teach you this fairy tale idea that there's someone for everyone and, you just wait and then your person comes along and they pick you, even if you're not the princess or whatever. Someone will see the real you and they pick you. And that proved to not be true in my teenage years and even most of my 20s. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I bought into that. And I was very resentful of having been taught that because it was not actually true for people like me. And then, I don't know, my husband came along and he really does just see me and he really, really likes me. He really, really likes who I am. And a lot of people assume that he has some sort of fetish or something. It's like, no, it's not. That's not what it is. His other wives weren't fat. I don't know. I don't know why I have to explain. Although, I mean, I guess I do. It's like no, we like each other just as people. We love each other. We're best friends and we care about each other as human beings. And I don't think that that's how most other people make their choices about who they spend their life with, which is not a great plan, in my opinion,
Yeah.
I I think choosing your partner based on aesthetics, and I think that my husband's incredibly handsome. He thinks that I'm beautiful, and we're attracted to each other. But if we didn't have this foundation of just really genuinely loving each other, and we work together, we write together, we write jokes, and my career wouldn't be where it is without him. If I had the way that men, I'm sorry to, well, I'm not sorry, the way that men choose a partner based on like, okay, well, I have to just pick the hottest one I can get.
Right.
I have to I have to upgrade to the hottest one. You guys, that is not a good plan.
No.
You got to hang out with this person every day until you die.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the other part of it is we just accept this idea that it's totally legit to leave your spouse if they gain weight. And it's like, obviously I don't want my husband to leave me if I gain weight, but like we said, people don't take fat people seriously. So I'm just going to flip it. My husband is not fat. There is nothing that could happen to his body that would make me leave him.
Right.
Because I love him. His body is not
the thing you love. That's not
I don't think we can separate ourselves from our bodies, but like the idea that I would leave him if he got, if he was maimed in an accident or if he got fat. It's unfathomable to me.
Yeah.
But it's totally normal when you talk about it the other direction, like, oh, well, if my wife got fat.
Right. I know. I think that comes from patriarchy too. It's like this pressure that men have been, or this indoctrination of men to always be looking for the conventionally most beautiful because that's a status symbol.
Right. Absolutely.
It's about status and power.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. Ugh, no, it's super fucked up. But it's amazing that you've found this relationship that really puts the lie to that.
Yeah. And I know a lot of male friends who I really care about who are really unhappy because they didn't bother to find someone that they like. They just date whoever is hottest. And I honestly, like, I can feel how lonely some of them are, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that sounds condescending, but it's just like I really think that this is a flawed system, and I don't think that it makes people happy. And I don't. And again, I'm not even saying that from like a fat woman's perspective. Like, honestly, just in terms of having empathy as a human being. Like, I want people to feel happy and fulfilled and find someone who really sees them and makes them feel like a whole vibrant person.
Yeah.
And I really think that mechanism is broken.
I agree. And I think it's, in patriarchy, it somewhat works in reverse too, where women are conditioned to look for symbols of status, right? Money, high-powered job, et cetera, right? Which I have always found very problematic and never bought into. And my fiance is an actor. He has no money.
Yeah.
But it's like, I feel like I've found someone who makes me happy and I can really talk to and hang out with all the time. And I want to be with him,
Right.
That's what I look for.
I am really, really happy every day. And we've been together now like 6 years, so it's not exactly honeymoon phase,
right.
And I just like every morning I wake up and I'm excited to talk to him. And I love him so much, even when he's being annoying.
There are always those moments.
Yeah. Like I want that for everyone,
Yeah, same.
Oh, man, if you find someone that you really like and then they get fat, oh my God, just
love them.
Yeah, like figure it out.
Yeah, completely. Our bodies are all going to change throughout life in some way, right? Like,
yeah, it's just not realistic to expect that they won't.
Exactly.
And I figured out how to love my own body by looking at pictures of other fat people and looking at them until they didn't make me uncomfortable anymore. Because I was, I was raised in the same culture, the same fat phobic culture.
You internalize some of that stigma.
Absolutely. So I had to unlearn it. And I did. And I know that it's possible to do. I remember the feeling of my brain changing and sort of the wrinkles reforming, and all it took was exposure, like and giving thinking to myself, okay, what if I found this beautiful? What if I stepped outside of diet culture for 1 second and I thought about this body objectively? What is objectively ugly about it? Why is this curve of a fat woman's stomach ugly, but the curve of this thin woman's clavicle is beautiful? You know what I mean? And once you start to do that and break it down into break a body down into its components, it just very quickly stops making any sense.
Yeah, it really does. And I think, questioning where that's coming from too, like what is the value that's being placed on this? Do I actually believe that? Or is that just something that's been told to me?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's been the same with me too in my body positivity journey, like, looking at fat acceptance blogs and, health at every size, Instagram accounts and stuff like that, body positive Instagram, like it has worked wonders in, being able to see aesthetic beauty in all kinds of different people.
Yeah.
And that has been the case for a lot of clients of mine too. I give that as an assignment actually to like follow certain bloggers and Instagram accounts because it really does rewire your brain and exposure to people in larger bodies can help shift cultural stigma so profoundly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to do it also with a wide spectrum of fat bodies. You know? I think this is a major problem in the body positivity conversation right now is that people think that it's fine to have, your endpoint be hourglass shaped white women who are a size or whatever. And that's not the finish line. And if you're not fighting for the very fattest people, the people with the least access to clothes and mobility and adequate medical care, et cetera, if you're not fighting for those people, the most marginalized people, you're still fighting for the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
I know. The body positive movement has gotten so watered down, I think.
Yeah, and so sort of, monetized. And either you fight for fat people or you don't. And it can't stop with what you personally find pretty or sexually attractive or quote unquote healthy. That's not what it's about. It's about human beings being able to live and thrive.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I could talk to you all day, but I'm mindful of the time.
Likewise.
So it's been so great. Tell us about where people can find your book and learn more about you.
Well, my book Shrill just came out in paperback. It came out in hardcover May of last year, and the paperback came out in February. And it's in bookstores all over the place, or you can buy it online. And I have a website, lindywest.net, that has my tour dates. I'm currently on a book tour and going all over the place, reading from the book and talking to people and hugging people and hearing people's stories. And I have a weekly column in The Guardian.
Definitely recommend following that. It's so good.
Oh, thank you. I have an Instagram. I have a public Facebook page if you want to come interact with me. So I'm very reachable. I did quit Twitter because it's poison.
Ugh, full of trolls.
Yeah. I just couldn't. It was eating my life and I needed to escape. But, I'm still very much out there and findable if you want to find me. Please find me.
Yes, and I'll put links in the show notes so people can find you too.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Lindy.
Thank you. This was really, really fun.
So that's our show. Thanks again so much to our guest for being here and to you guys for listening. And we'll be back again next week with another brand new episode. Meanwhile, I'd love to stay in touch. And the best way to do that is via email. So you can go to christyharrison.com/email to sign up for my VIP list. I'll send you info about new episodes of the podcast as they drop, as well as exclusive sneak previews of new episodes, giveaways and other special deals on the products and services I offer, special tips on how to make peace with food and learn to trust your body, and a whole lot more. Sign up at christyharrison.com/email. You can also subscribe via iTunes and leave us a nice rating and review, which is a great way to get the word out about the podcast and help other people find these important messages. Just go to iTunes from your computer or your podcasts app, type in Food Psych to the search bar, click on the result that comes up under podcasts, and then click on ratings and reviews, and you can leave a rating and review right there. And I really appreciate all the 5-star reviews and wonderful ratings that we've gotten because it's helped us climb really high right now in the rankings. And that's really cool because we're competing against some of the weight management and body shaming types of messages that I'm trying to fight with this podcast. So we've really started to beat out a lot of the diety voices, and I'd love to continue climbing higher in the rankings to get this message out even further. So please leave us a nice rating and review. It's so very much appreciated, and thanks to everyone who's left reviews so far. The music you're hearing behind me now is by a band called AWOL, and the track is called Food, used under the Creative Commons license. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, stay psyched.
Stupid or scared, no work in the kitchen now. Who put you there in that perfect position now? Bullies want your food, and you ain't really beat. Have you ever went over your friend's house to eat?